Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters. This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Get ready, pal.
You know, I've seen firsthand what the reports make clear. The devastating toll of climate change and its existential threat to all of us, and is the ultimate threat to humanity, climate change.
The ultimate threat to humanity. Yesterday, Biden unveiled his fifth national climate assessment. And, you know, we've got some pretty serious stuff going on in the world. Are you feeling existentially threatened by climate change, Mark?
It's supposed to be 70 degrees today. I'm kind of loving climate change.
Yeah, no
I don't know
kidding.
about you.
I haven't seen a single polar bear around the station today.
I mean, you'd think maybe he'd get his head on straight and worry about some of the other things going on, like, you know, cost of goods going up, China and Taiwan, the war in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine. Oh, no, we have climate change because we have nice weather. It's
a bit tone deaf, and particularly the timing, right? I mean, we've heard climate change is the most important thing ever from the Democrats for years, but like, that's bad timing, I think, for him. Well, especially he is supposed to meet with President Xi Jinping today,
and his number one topic is climate change.
He's also
which China will never agree to help with because they don't want to like crack down on the coal-fired plants that they're using to build an economy to take us on.
They're also in San Francisco, so they are going to be talking about fentanyl. Apparently.
Watch where you step.
And fences, because they suddenly have cleaned up all the homeless encampments in San Francisco after years of saying there's no way to clean them up.
Hose the poop off the sidewalks just for the Chinese, right?
As soon as the overlord walks in, Gavin Newsom gets to work.
Well, if you are watching and following along today, I saw this little comedy bit, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. And I think we've got this audio teed up for you. So if you're watching Biden today, watch for this.
It's sad. I'm rooting for the guy. Obviously, I want things to go well. But it's hard to watch him do anything. Anytime I watch Biden do anything, I get the same feeling as like, you ever go to a friend's house and they have like a 16-year-old dog and it walks in the room? And you got to do that whole like, oh, hey, there he is. Just look at him. He's looking great. My favorite thing about Biden is anytime Biden finishes a speech, he transforms into a Roomba.
And so you see the guy, you know how your Roomba kind of wanders over here and then kind of bonks into something, and then he turns around and kind of bonks into something else, and then he's bonking into stuff. And he does that. He kind of wanders around the stage till someone kind of guides him a different way. And so actually my Roomba is named Joe Biden, but not because he bonks into stuff. I just asked my husband and my kids, name something that sucks. And they said,
very good.
Joe Biden. All right.
There's so many different things I could say right now, Stephanie.
Your family has a nickname for your Roomba, but it's more politically correct, I think, right?
Yeah, I think it's Rosie, and Rosie sometimes gets stuck under the bed. We have to go rescue her.
I have a Roomba. It's called a Roomba.
Oh, come on, Mark.
Well, Mark, that's because you're a party pooper.
Have a little bit of fun. All right, we are going to be having a lot of fun this weekend. We are, what's our Mizzou ranking, 9?
Number 9.
About that.
Mark's excited.
First time ever.
Yeah. Oh, really?
I think so.
First time in the college football playoff ranking.
Yeah, at least in the modern era, right?
Yep. First time in the top 10.
All right. Well, we are having our very last Tiger Tailgate. Hannah, what do we know about the Tiger Tailgate?
Gates open at 4:30 in front of Mizzou Arena. We've got the big white tent set up. You can't miss us. Thanks to Buffalo Wild Wings and other sponsors, you get free food and drinks.
Awesome. That is going to be super fun. Mark, I know, are you headed up to Columbia?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll go to that game. Last home game, Senior Day.
Senior Day, yeah.
You know, that they have one last game after that down in Arizona, in Arkansas, but, you know, Arkansas seems to be pretty hapless this year.
Yeah,
Stephanie, did you finally establish that we are not playing Georgia again?
Yeah.
Did you finally get that straight?
I got myself super confused. We are playing Florida. Right?
Gators. Not Gators, right? Not dogs.
Florida, Georgia, you know. Kind of all the same part of the country.
Isn't there a line right there in a country van?
And I am going to defend myself because there was a lot of commentary on Twitter about Mizzou and Georgia, but it happens to be about long-term implications of Mizzou's season this year, and was saying, you know, long term, the biggest threat to Georgia is Mizzou. Agree, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if they can keep, you know, 1 year does not a trend make. And if you look at how bad we were last year, I'm hopeful that next year will be better. But
I'm sure the dogs factor LSU into the mix a little bit, and even the kind of weird year that Crimson Tide's having.
Well, we all knew it was going to come down to Alabama and Georgia in the end. And then Alabama lost that early game to Texas, and everybody thought, oh, this is the end of Saban. And see, if you wanted to cue music, this is when you do the Darth Vader Imperial March. That's Alabama. It's just they slowly
Gary Pinkel, I am your
here they
father.
are. They've got one loss. They're the SEC championship. If you want to be a betting person, I would never bet against Alabama at the end of the year.
And just a reminder, sports betting is still illegal in Missouri thanks to our state legislature. All right,
but legal in Kansas and Illinois, so go figure.
There you go.
All right, we have some for the upcoming legislative session from him. We're also talking to Raven Harrison just after 7 o'clock. I think there are some things going on in D.C. that she's not too happy about. We haven't really talked about this whole Mayorkas impeachment resolution, and I can just, I know she's fired up about that. And then also we're going to be talking with Andrew Koenig. He is a state senator. He's running for state treasurer, but we're getting really, really close to the upcoming legislative session. Pre-filing starts, December 1, Mark?
December 1. It's only a couple weeks away.
Wow.
Thanksgiving, and then boom, we're into legislative session. And I saw that the House is going to start early budget hearings this year. They've not done this before. They're going to do early budget hearings. I think it's starting the first week of December, so that they can try to get ahead of the curve on the budget, so they don't have the problems with the Senate like they did last time around, where the House gets its budget out late, and then the Senate kind of hangs everything up.
We were really we're down to the wire every time, but last year we really were down to the wire. Yesterday, 2 days ago, big news out of the Attorney General's office. I think it was late Monday. He released this report on Kim Gardner. And so I had a chance to take a quick look at it yesterday. But what are your thoughts? I mean, it's kind of, she's gone, right? So I think a lot of people are like, well, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's looking at what the flaws were in the office, in addition to just what her personal problems were, talking about notifying victims. He's got some legislative proposals in there about making sure victims get better notification about where their cases are at. That was a big deal. Talking some about the charging requirements and charging selections that prosecutors have. I mean, prosecutors, as we know, have this enormous amount of discretion, and that's great if you use it on a case-by-case basis. When you use it on a blanket basis, it stops being discretion, it starts being policy, and that's probably where the legislature ought to have a say.
Yeah, and I think what we know, I mean, just from an attorney's perspective in general, that's where attorneys often get in trouble, is just lack of communication with their clients. And I think especially when you're dealing with victims, that has to be priority number one. And
she was really tried to avoid having people go to jail, which I think is weird, when you're talking about being a prosecutor of criminals.
Usually prosecutors kind of all about their record.
To the extent that there's a charge out there called armed criminal action, which you hear probably lots of times when they talk about a shooting or something, they'll mention that somebody got charged with armed criminal action. Armed criminal action has a mandatory, you have to go to prison if you're convicted of it.
It's 7 to 10 years.
Yeah,
right
5 to 7. So there's a mandatory minimum for armed criminal action. Well, her office would intentionally never charge that in a shooting. She might charge all the other stuff, then she would plea it, and because there was no armed criminal action in there, nobody would ever go to jail.
Wow.
And I would, Mark, you're absolutely right, and it happened over and over again. And then she was very upset with the press coverage in St. Louis, which, quite frankly, others felt like they weren't tough enough, but. There's something else in that report that we should point out that Andrew Bailey puts in there, and he doesn't elaborate, the Attorney General, but he specifically talks about the fact that when he came in there, the importance of sending someone to court to these hearings. In other words, there were cases where the prosecutors weren't showing up for court. In staffing issues, in some cases, as I recall, in at least one case that led to a dismissal of a case. So I definitely think it's pretty scathing what is in there. And also, it talks about her going to school for this nursing as well. That's mentioned in there. He doesn't go into it a lot of detail, but it's critical. It is a critical report.
Yeah, and I thought one of the things that was interesting is she closed what's called the warrant office.
Yes.
And the warrant office, we don't really have one in Cole County or probably in Boone County. We're smaller jurisdictions, but in big jurisdictions, when the police arrest somebody, they call the warrant office so that the prosecutor on duty can get a judge to issue a warrant to hold the person for whatever the crime is. She literally just closed it. So police would arrest somebody, they'd want to hold them. Nobody would issue a warrant, and as a result, they got turned right back out on the streets.
Yeah, and those clearance kind of things never happen. And police, what Metropolitan Police saves like 90% of cases they presented to Kim Gardner never went anywhere.
And she had a list of officers she would not take their cases because she felt like they were biased, etc. Let's also not forget CBS 60 Minutes did a piece a couple of years ago on Kim Gardner. It was very favorable. It portrayed her in a very favorable light.
Of course it was.
As a reform that story was never updated. And they took criticism, even some more Bill McClellan type columnists in St. Louis pointed out. As far as I never saw an update on 60 Minutes, but national viewers just they were presented as if this was a up and coming really up and coming, but they never got the update at the end.
Yeah, how much did George Soros pay for that CBS report? I mean, she's been horrible for the region. We've got a new face in there. It's Gabe Gore. Mark, you and I have had a chance to deal with him before. I think he's doing a fair job, but obviously there's a lot to clean up there.
I heard somebody say yesterday they actually feel like safe going to a soccer game in downtown St. Louis now because Gabe Gore's on the job and they're actually arresting people and putting them in jail. But the Soros issue is one that you can't overlook because the amount of money that Soros poured into these various very far left-wing progressive prosecutors around the country is really quite amazing. Hundreds of millions of dollars in total.
Well, hopefully we can get past that. All right. For the sake of all of the good things that are going on in St. Louis, some of these soccer stadiums and new businesses, and hopefully we can get the Cardinals back on track and more people down at the stadium next year. So coming up next, we've got your daily DC rundown. John, you turned me on to this. debate online, but it continues. They were quite heated yesterday. That was in the Senate Help Committee, which is actually health, education, labor, and pensions, because I don't think any of us are getting any help from the Senate lately, although it's their turn because the House yesterday passed this new spending proposal, this stopgap. The deadline, of course, is Friday. We've got kind of this two-tier approach with the help of Democrats and Republicans to yet join together. We are going to fund the government.
Kumbaya.
And the Senate seems to be on track to take that thing up and pass it. So we actually may not have shut down right in time for Thanksgiving when you want to fly somewhere.
There you go.
You know?
Do they have any choice, though? I mean, honestly, it's holidays. They're like the rest of us. They procrastinate till the very end. But, I mean, they've been criticized before, and I think rightfully so, that no party really is good at cutting spending. So they all talk a big game, and when it comes down to the end, we just spend.
Yeah, it's always
And
more
print
money.
more.
Yeah, always more money, more deficit, more debt, never stops. But who knows? Maybe some Florida guy will file a motion to remove the Speaker of the House again. We'll see if we can have chaos
Mark,
once more.
Don't wish that on us. You need to knock on wood or something. Okay, Biden is meeting with President Xi Jinping of China today, and that is part of the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, APEC. They're in San Francisco. Of course, we spoke earlier about how San Francisco has tried to clean up their act before the communists arrive to town, right?
Yeah, I mean, they put up fences. They cleaned up the homeless encampments. I wonder if they
Got out
washed
the fire hoses.
Yes, they washed the poop off the street, get the needles out of the bushes. Biden is staying at the Fairmont Hotel, which is on top of Nob Hill, which ironically I have been to right before things really went bad. And even then, you literally walked down the street and saw excrement on the street and needles everywhere. And that was when it was still good San Francisco.
That was when the dot-commers were all still in residence, right?
That place is a train wreck. I don't know why anybody would want to live there. I guess they're just all moving to Texas, but
Well, it's frustrating for me because, of course, we heard Biden earlier say and yesterday say, well, climate change is the biggest threat to humanity right now. And I'm thinking China is right there. They're in California, and they're saying, what, you're not worried about us? Because you probably should be.
They're just buying up land around plants and military bases. I saw that. That was a big attack line in one of the recent kind of debate hits was the question over South Carolina bringing in Chinese businesses when Nikki Haley was governor down there. I mean, China is an aggressor, not just militarily, but economically they're an aggressor. And they make no bones about it. Their entire government is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. All the businesses are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, and their goal is world domination, and they don't actually make any bones about that.
And they're just looking at Biden thinking, we've got you right where we want you.
And you're on TikTok, so,
there you go.
Maybe we could follow Nepal and ban TikTok and at least get that part of the Chinese government out of the system.
Mark.
Yeah, no, we're not
You're
doing
starting beef with me at 6:30 in the morning. Come on, man.
Could be all day, Hannah. Who knows? We may be going back and forth on this.
3-hour show.
All right, we are watching the polling. Apparently, Trump of Associated Industries of Missouri. Now, Ray, we've been talking to the university folks a little bit the last few weeks about the budget, and the business community has been chalking up some big wins on tax policy. We've gotten lower tax rates, we've gotten tax, money returned to the citizens, and I know that's been a big priority. But what we're hearing is, times are not always going to be this good, and we might be heading into a few years of a tighter budget situation. So, what are you all looking at as far as tax policy going forward?
Well, thanks very much for having me, first of all. And, you're right. We have reduced taxes, actually, because of the efforts of Associated Industries and others. We've been able to cut taxes for everyone by about 40%, especially business people, which has been really good. And what's been interesting is it's actually played out the way that we said it would. As we cut taxes, actually, we've been generating more money. And part of that was through a change we made to the corporate income tax. So even though we have cut taxes, there is still money coming into the government, and it is still enough to fund the government and actually have a little surplus left over, about $2 billion, we understand, this year. We understand, though, that you can't cut forever, that you do have to take a break and maybe wait and see how these things play out, because we've already scheduled, we have taxes scheduled to be reduced if we hit certain revenue targets in the future. So I think it might be a good time for us to take a pause on dramatic cuts, maybe nibbling around the edges, but I think maybe there'll be some targeted exemptions and things that we talk about, but not wholesale changes to the tax structure.
So Ray, AIM has a really long history of supporting transportation projects. I mean, obviously last session, biggest victory in my lifetime in transportation, getting the I-70 funding through, which thank God we need it because I drive it way too often and it's a mess. Budget, there's still money in the budget. There's still going to be lots of transportation needs beyond just I-70 and the smaller amounts of money that were put in for 44. What are the transportation priorities this year? Because business can't operate if there's not a good infrastructure system.
You're absolutely right, Mark. And so we're part of a group called the Missourians for Transportation Investment, and it includes the ACEC of Missouri, the engineers, the AGC of Missouri, the contractors. And we were successful in working together with the cities and a broad group, including organized labor and others, to get the I-70 bill passed. And that provided $1.4 billion now in funding to help expand and rebuild I-70 to 6 lanes across the state. And then another $1.4 billion in bonding to finish the project, and then also provided some money to start the work on I-44. We've been talking already with the budget chairman in the House, who has an idea of using $2 billion of the existing state surplus to start the work on I-44, amongst other priorities. I think we had $100 million for rural roads last year. There's a thought that they can increase that, or at least maybe do that again this year. So that's going to be significant for our rural routes as well, because a lot of people don't realize a lot of manufacturing facilities are located in rural areas. Very often they are the major employers in some of the rural areas, and you've got to be able to get goods and raw materials in and out and people safely to work and back. So transportation on rural routes is as important to some as the interstates, but of course the interstates affect all of us. I cackle sometimes when people say that they aren't affected by I-70 because they're located in another part of the state, and it's like, well, if you go and pick up those food items at your local grocery store, chances are at some point they hit I-70 or I-44 or some of the major interstates. So I think that's going to be something. I know that's something that will be talked about. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get it done or not, but it was a bold idea when we started talking about I-70, and it was actually Lincoln Huff, Senator Lincoln Huff, who does not live on I-70. His district is on I-44, that said, let's do I-70 and get it done and start the work on 44. So we're excited about that potentially being another landmark investment if we're able to get that done.
Ray, you've spent a lot of years around the Capitol and all. You've been there during election years, and then we saw the infighting the past couple sessions between the GOP senators at the State House. How confident are you for your legislative priorities in this election year coming up?
That's a great question, and something that we'll be able to tell here in just a couple of months. But I'm not very optimistic. Election years are always tough, as you said, but here lately we've had difficulty with people hijacking the Senate floor in particular for what seems to be personal political agendas. When you don't allow any business to be conducted except, the sound of your own voice on the Senate floor, that can be very disturbing. In fact, we passed fewer bills this last year than we did in a year except COVID. And that was by design of those who wanted to hijack the process. I only see that getting worse. You have people that are running for open Senate seats. You have people in the Senate running for statewide offices. I just see it becoming a real tough environment to get things done. That said, there will be some things that have to pass. One of the things that's going to be a key issue this next year is the federal reimbursement allowance reauthorization. And that's something that comes up every several years. And this year, I've already heard about that particular bill being hijacked into a discussion about abortion and some other things. So it looks like that bill will be a hostage that, and, one year we actually didn't pass the FRA and had to have a special session to come back in and pass the FRA bill because it was used as a political football. So I see that happening probably again. I'm not real optimistic about getting anything significant really done, but I do think this is a good year for us to get some good ideas out there and start discussing them. And that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to accomplish this year, is at least getting some different ideas out there, get them vetted through the hearing process, and then, Lord knows what happens when we get to the floor.
Now, yesterday we saw the news that inflation was better than expected. Still, not where we were at 2 years ago, but you're having a meeting this week in Jeff City. You're constantly out there talking to your members who are business owners. Are you hearing from them? Yeah, things are looking better, or, we're still struggling. And I'm going to assume it's probably the latter, being a business owner myself, that, there's still some things to work on. What are they? But what is it? Is it workforce, childcare, labor, just inflation? What are they struggling with?
Everything that you just mentioned, all of that is important. And you're right. Even though inflation is easing, that still means, we aren't going and fixing the problem. So, inflation being so high, prices are very high right now for everyone. So we all see it in the things we buy every day. Go to the grocery store, you paying $6 for a bag of chips. It used to be $3.50. I mean, everyone knows what's going on. And the same thing is affecting business owners. So all the raw materials are also inflated. And just because the rate of increase slows doesn't mean it goes down. And that's the part that I think people are having difficulty with is, inflation's slowing, but it's not reversing. We aren't seeing it, those prices go down. And so that's keeping pressure on everyone. Childcare, another big, huge problem for us. I don't know if anyone has gone out to try to find childcare lately, but finding quality childcare and availability of any childcare is very difficult across the state. And that's impacting our ability to hire people that have children. And the fact that the schools, tend to let out every time their sports team wins something, they let school out, and the parents have to scramble to try to find daycare for their children, or they have to take off work. So that impacts work as well. So a lot of issues are out there, and we have our board coming in today. Actually, we're having a meeting to discuss our legislative priorities, and I'll give them the same rosy outlook that I just gave everyone, in terms of prospects for passage of things. But they're our board represents small and large businesses all across the state of Missouri, and it'll be a good time for us to talk about those things and see what their pressure points are.
So Ray, one issue we haven't touched on, tort reform. Obviously, it's a big issue for the business community. It's something that the dynamics have changed, I think, a lot in the legislature, with very conservative, particularly kind of the MAGA conference, so to speak, the very conservative conference becoming very pro-trial lawyer and very pro-litigation. What are the plans to combat that and try to get some tort reform in this next session?
Well, that's a great question, Mark. And we had a simple bill. Everyone says their bills are simple, but this was a truly simple bill to reduce the statute of limitations on civil suits from 5 years to 2 years in Missouri. Like most other states. Most other states have some have a 3-year. Very, very few have a 5-year. And we are really an outlier in that category. And what that means is that's the length of time that you have to file a lawsuit after an injury has occurred. We think we should pull that back down to something more reasonable, either 2 or 3 years. And as you said, the trial attorney-funded Republicans have blocked that on the Senate floor. We had a group of 5 or 6 of them last year that stood up and blocked it. I don't see that getting any better this year. I think we'll try again. But it's just kind of sad to watch the infiltration of plaintiff's attorney money going to Republican causes, and then those Republicans standing up and blocking reasonable tort reform that really is impacting the whole system, and doing it under the name of saying that everyone needs their day in court. Well, everyone will have their day in court. You just have to make sure that, and people wonder, well, what's the problem with the statute of limitations being 5 years? Think about it. If an accident occurs on your property and you aren't aware of it, the plaintiff's attorney goes and gathers all the evidence that they want, and they sit on it for 4 years and then hit you with the lawsuit. You're trying to scramble to find your evidence, your witnesses from 4 years ago. I mean, many of us can't remember what we had for breakfast yesterday. So memories fade over time, and evidence disappears over time. If the plaintiff's attorneys have already packaged up their side of the equation, the defense attorneys are really left with a big problem, and it forces settlements in a lot of cases where there shouldn't be. So that's another thing we think should be addressed. That's something that certainly we will try again. I, again, do not expect that to be any better this year, because people will be looking for any reason to get the microphone and get some free earned media. And I see that being another big problem.
We have a lot of people who are looking at those statewide offices, and I agree with you, Ray. I think it's going to be a problem for anyone wanting to get some things done this year. Well, we always look forward to talking with you. We wish you well with your meetings and with the legislative session, and appreciate the work you're doing on behalf of Missouri business owners. co-host Mark Ellinger this morning, and we've got an update in this hockey story. I think this was overseas, and about 2 weeks ago, they were playing in the UK, and Adam Johnson killed while playing. I think it's Matt Petgrave. Anyway, weird play. He kind of gets bumped. The skate goes up, slices his neck. And he gets to the hospital but dies. And to everyone saying, was that an intentional thing? And Matt Petgrave has been known, I think he had like the most time spent in the penalty box, is known as kind of a tough player.
Enforcer.
And people were slowing down the action, and it was all over Twitter. It's really gory. If you haven't seen it, I don't know that I would suggest watching it. But they've actually charged Matt Petgrave with manslaughter in Adam Johnson's death yesterday. I'm kind of surprised by that. Mark, you look surprised.
I think it's stupid. Let me start there. But it's the UK. They have a different system than we do here. They have an investigatory system as opposed to an accusatory system. So it's a little different system they use. And I kind of feel sorry for Petgrave because he's effectively going to have to prove his innocence now. And I think the argument they're going to try to make is because he was a brawler and an enforcer and he had this long history that, he changed from it being an accident to being a proximate cause because you knew you were going to make contact. You knew you were trying to hurt people. And then you ended up hurting somebody. It's kind of like if you throw a punch at somebody. If you throw a punch at somebody, that's assault. If you just happen to hit them the wrong way and they die, it's murder. Even if you never intended to kill them because you intended to throw the punch. That's about as far as I can go.
And you talked about English common law because we were looking at the story and they didn't even name the guy charged with manslaughter.
Yeah, it's weird.
In the charging statement.
It's they intentionally kept that out of it. It's a weird situation, and we talked about it. I think was it last week or the week before. This happened here. It actually happened in St. Louis a bunch of years ago when Kent Malarchuk got his neck cut in another fluke exact kind of situation, except for he was the goalie and got hit in the neck. I think the NHL he lived mostly because there was a Vietnam medic who was on the bench who came running out and managed to put immediate triage on it. But the NHL is now talking about mandating neck guards.
Yep.
And I think, is it next season or the season after the mandated neck guards are going to go into effect?
Well, that was the old joke. What is the object of the game of hockey? Hit the goalie in the neck with a puck. That was the line for years.
Well, the old joke I always thought was I went to a fight and a hockey game broke out.
Well,
or a Senate hearing.
Isn't there also a certain level of risk that you accept when you lace up your skates and get out on the ice?
You would think so.
That just me?
No, yes, Hannah, you're exactly right. And also the neck guards are available now. So if you also accept risk having that available to you and then not wearing them. I guess I've heard the reason they make turning your head really difficult and just seeing and everything else. And so the hockey players don't like the neck guard.
Talk about risk. Have you ever met a professional hockey player that didn't have a broken nose?
Or missing teeth?
It's unbelievable. It's a tough sport.
Like the same thing back in what probably the
Raven Harrison, Raven, what is your take on this rally from yesterday?
That was actually a rally. There was no desecration of statues, no burning, no looting, no violence, just, singing, praying, and marching. And it is just so refreshing to see that that's what it should look like, except for with the Hamas. We've got, burning, calls for violence, assaulting police officers, massive arrests. I mean, it's just really amazing what our country has delved into.
It really is, and we've seen that right here in St. Louis. So, now that we've got, now that we've had this rally and Congress is looking at funding, what do you hope to see out of Congress? Do you think that rally impressed upon them that, hey, we've got to do something with regard to funding for Israel?
I think it really impressed upon the American people the stark difference of what they're fighting for. They're seeing that, there are two sides, both claiming victim status, but one is resorting to violence and one is resorting to just really pushing the edges of the law. So what you're seeing from Congress, this is also a divide that has caused Democrats to jump over to the Republican side, which means this is an issue they can't ignore. They're going to absolutely unravel if they don't deal with this situation and figure out a way to shore up the relationship with Israel when you have open anti-Semites in the halls of Congress.
So Raven, you talk a little bit about bipartisanship there. Obviously, this is an issue where we see some, but we actually got the two-step continuing resolution passed yesterday in a bipartisan measure through the House that's going to the Senate now. What's going to be the fallout inside the House now? Because there's some conservative Republicans that are really unhappy with this proposal.
Correct, and I'm one of them. And I have to honestly say, it's not so much the bipartisan I'm concerned with in the short term. It is the lack of priorities of what the Republican Party's constituents have said they want. What they said they want is a balanced budget and spending cuts. How is this allowed to go forward with no spending cuts? So all they've done is rubber stamped more money with no solution on how to bring our deficit down. So that's the issue where it doesn't really matter if it's bipartisan. It's still going to be a disaster. So having, the Democrats and the Republicans be able to get on the same page, fantastic. But if one of them is saying spend, 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 and the other one's saying, oh, okay, and they're on the same page, then that's the problem.
Now, I know you're not a status quo kind of gal, and I think we even had a little bit of separation between you and I on the whole Matt Gaetz thing and voting out the speaker, and you said we can't just keep doing what we're doing. And so I knew when I saw the resolution on impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas and 8 Republicans voting against it, I knew you'd be fired up. What's your takeaway from that going down?
It is absolutely horrific. It is horrific how these, you've got it going both ways. The issue with McCarthy, and I love that we can agree to disagree. That's how it used to be able to work, is that we could, speak our opinions and then just still be friends at the end of the day. But the difference here is McCarthy made a bunch of concessions and promises that were demanded by the constituents. We want the J6 states. We still haven't seen them. We wanted these single bill resolutions, and we wanted a secure border. He agreed to those and then did not hold up. And now we're seeing a repeat, but the difference is now we're trying to force for accountability. We've had 9 million people let into our country. We've had uprisings, terrorist attacks, mass shootings. Mayorkas has completely failed. He has opened our border up, which is his fundamental number one responsibility. And now he is not being held accountable. And we're hearing that this failure, it's a failure, but it's kind of Biden's fault. Well, Biden doesn't know where he is. So that is a cop-out. And the fact that they are now we have nothing. We have no funding with this resolution that goes to securing our border. We had a bunch of Syrian and Iran fighting age men that came in yesterday. Hundreds, to the tune of 500 to 700 came in yesterday. So we're still being opened up. And then we've got nothing but Chinese flags in San Francisco, which they spent taxpayer money to clean up for President Xi.
Raven, talk to us about your take on the meetings between Biden and Xi. Anything substantive going to happen or just more of the same?
It already has. So what they've done is basically rolled over to a bunch of green concessions that will be funded and produced by China. So we're buying more of their stuff. Biden's agreeing not to criticize Xi about basically being communist and torturing his people or, wanting to invade Taiwan. So completely, just brown-nosed Xi and cleaned up San Francisco. San Francisco's never looked like that. And that just goes to show that they can clean that city up if they want to. They're just not willing to do it for taxpayers or vets. So all he's done is basically shore up. And the one thing of note was when the parade went through for Xi, you would have really had to look twice to see that we were not in China. There was not one single American flag on display through Xi's parade through the streets of San Francisco. All Chinese flags, and absolutely, utterly un-American and quite honestly disgusting.
Now, we know you're an America First person, and you are all in for Trump. We know this about you, Raven. But, Jim Scott dropped out. We haven't had a chance to talk with you since then. This morning,
Yes.
Trump's very own pollsters are saying maybe that helps Nikki Haley. But I think she really stepped in it yesterday and kind of went viral on Twitter for something she said
Yes.
To the Ruthless folks. I think Hannah has this audio.
Thing is, every person on social media should be verified by their name. That's, first of all, it's a national security threat. When you do that, all of a sudden people have to stand by what they say, and it gets rid of the Russian bots, the Iranian bots, and the Chinese bots. And then you're going to get some civility when people know their name is next to what they say.
Agree or disagree, Raven?
Disagree, because it also gets rid of the First Amendment, that little pesky thing of the First Amendment. And the fact that everybody will be verified except your daughter, she absolutely did step in it. That was horrible statement for her to make, and I'm seeing the blowback across the social media platforms. It doesn't work that way. You can't decide and cherry pick which elements of free speech you're okay with and you're not okay with. That's really an issue. And Vivek, took some heat for, initially saying, we're going to ban TikTok and everything. Again, it goes in the same vein of what she's talking about. So I don't think she did any favors for herself. I thought Tim Scott, class act when he dropped out. He knew it was time. And very classy statement. Nikki Haley, I think it may give her a little forward trajectory just because Ken Griffin, DeSantis' biggest donor, is looking to start backing her. But there really has been no forward momentum in the polls, and there certainly won't be after this.
And it looks like now we're down to potentially at the next debate 2 people on the stage because of the polling numbers and the donor numbers. It could just be Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis on the stage. Maybe President Trump will show up finally for a debate. But I guess the real question is, as this thing goes forward into the initial states, we're like, a little over a month and a half away from the Iowa caucuses.
Yes.
Is there a path for anybody, or is the deal already baked and it's going to be Trump and Biden, in which case, Kennedy may suddenly be a choice that people are looking at?
Well, you've got two things to unpack there, and this has nothing to do with my, feelings about President Trump, but he will be the nomination. It's just not possible for them to bridge this. I don't say that as a loyalist. I say that as an analyst. And there's no pathway to any of these. They have not been able to move forward. And if President Trump was to show up at the debate, that's all you would see is tit for tat fighting between the candidates and him. And I would not advise him to do that as his strategist. So I think it's going to, rightfully, hopefully we can get a little of the animus when we start narrowing down. But again, I don't see any of them bridging a 40 to 50 point lead in the polls to overcome that. So I think you're going to see more posturing. Iowa's going to be interesting. It always is. I'll likely be there on site for that. But you're seeing desperation, and you're going to see money will be key. If DeSantis can keep his funding intact, but then now those were wanting to go over to Nikki Haley. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens next.
Well, if you go to Iowa, we want to report from the ground for sure. That is really exciting. And Rick is reminding me on the text that we're just a little over 100 days from the caucuses in Missouri. So that coming up as well. Well, yes. Raven, we always appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us this morning. We will talk to you next week.
Sounds great.
All right. Coming up next, we've got What's Hot with Hannah.
talking world records and Hallmark movies. Unfortunately.
Too soon.
It's not okay. It's time for What's Hot with Hannah, which means it's 7:25-ish, and look at me.
Yeah, it's actually early.
Gold star.
I could probably count on one hand how many times that's happened. So congratulations, Mark. Thank you for making sure we were on time this morning.
You know, every time I show up, we seem to be a little more efficient. I don't know what's going on here.
Mark looked like the third base coach sending signals into Stephanie.
Now, I know we all love to talk about Hallmark movies, especially this time of year, because it is Christmas time, and I don't care what anybody says. We will pause and celebrate Thanksgiving next Thursday. But other than that, it's Christmas time, and I heard Mark even decorated his house for the season already. So Mark is with me on that one.
Mark, just for the record, Mark did not do any decorating of his house.
And the station is already decorated.
That's right. The elves came by and fixed us up.
We have our first holiday party this week. I'm sorry, guys, but it's Christmas time. And because of that, Hallmark is looking for inspiration for new movies because they're getting tired of the same old, worn-out storyline, apparently, of someone from a big city moves to a small town, falls in love with a small towner, but doesn't know if it's going to work out because they're from different worlds.
And it's all filmed in Canada.
Yeah, I think you missed your calling. I think you could make better money. You're a screenwriter now. You're all on strike. You could go.
Well, they looked for inspiration in a 15-year-old, which sounds a little weird when I say that out loud. We're going to the UK for the second time this morning. 15-year-old Alden Maxwell has broken his own Guinness World Record a few times now. And that is for stacking Jenga blocks, which I'm terrible at that game. My hands shake too bad, and it's not pretty. The first time he broke the Guinness World Record, he was able to stack 638 Jenga blocks on one Jenga block, which blew my mind.
With a ladder?
I don't know. There's video on the Wake Up in Missouri Facebook page if you want to go check it out, Stephanie.
Okay.
I can't give that away. But the next time he broke the record, he broke it with 1,400 blocks.
Oh, my gosh.
Which is crazier. And then the third time, 1,840 Jenga blocks. And Hallmark saw this and said, that would make a great storyline for one of our terrible, mushy-gushy romance Christmas movies.
Yeah, the plot line could be the kid when he stacks the blocks. As soon as somebody screams Jenga, he has a panic attack.
and his widowed mom will meet her long-lost high school love who happens to be a baseball player and an expert Jenga stacker who shows up in town.
Now, God bless us, everyone.
Now, this kid actually makes a little cameo in the movie, which is kind of cool. I guess it was one of his dreams after breaking his own world record 3 times to star in a movie. I wouldn't necessarily call this starring, but he makes a little cameo. And the movie actually premieres tonight, believe it or not.
I'll be sure and tune in. I'm sorry, watching someone stack Jenga blocks sounds like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
And I'm curious as to how long it would take to stack, almost 1,900 Jenga blocks.
About 2 hours from 7 to 9 on Hallmark Channel.
What's the title of this movie? Do we know?
It is called A World Record Christmas.
This is terrible. It's just getting worse. I mean, we should just stick with the classics. My kids actually last night watched Home Alone, and I caught a few scenes, and yes, John's doing the Kevin face right now. We watched the guy with his head catch on fire. I could watch that movie over and over and over.
But have you gotten the greatest Christmas movie of all time shown for your children yet? No. Die Hard, the ultimate Christmas movie. You need to make sure your kids know all the lines out of that because it's the most important movie.
Might want to get the PG edited version for them.
See, I have something against that movie, I guess. I've never seen it. But my first I know. My first Christmas here at Zimmer, I got pranked by Brian Hansen, who produces the Gary Nolan Show and the Randy Tobler Show here on the radio station. He came in during Wake Up Mid-Missouri and said I needed to let the host at the time know that there was breaking news and that there was shots fired at, is it Yakatomi?
Nakatomi Tower.
Yeah. So I was all concerned, and Brandon immediately knew that it was a prank, and I didn't understand why he was laughing. It was a whole thing. So
now you need to go watch the movie, Hannah, just so you can understand all the gags.
I've got a chip on my shoulder. I can't help it.
At least Hanson didn't share anything past yippee-yi-yay.
You didn't say it with the German accent. It's much better.
Oh, my goodness, you all. All right. Well, you can tune in tonight to a world record Christmas. I know most of you probably have better things to do with your life, but if that's your thing, I hope you enjoy it. We are going to be talking with State Senator Andrew Koenig in the 8 o'clock hour. $3. When's the last time you saw that, Hannah?
When was the last time Trump was in office?
Right?
No, I was pretty proud of that find, and I posted it on the Wake Up Mid-Missouri Facebook page.
And you were quickly humbled by the Wake Up family.
I was.
So our folks, I think the winner might be Boonville, actually. I think folks are saying they've seen it as low as $2.69 in Boonville, which isn't too far away. And we're seeing they're saying Southern Missouri is $2.61, St. Charles $2.75. So lots of folks around Missouri now paying under $3, which if I see a 2, I'm pretty excited, Mark.
Yeah, well, not in Jeff City. It's always 20 cents more expensive here for some reason.
Montauk County's not too far behind, Cole.
Right. I don't understand it.
Gavin Newsom.
You can literally drive up Highway 63 and halfway up the gas price drops. I mean, it's unbelievable. Or drive 54 towards the lake and the gas price drops.
You know who the big loser is, though, that I've found in mid-Missouri?
Who?
Of all the towns in mid-Missouri that you could think of, Hauswirth. They're still sitting at $3.24.
Wow.
And in Columbia and Centralia, kind of the towns on either side, it's under $3. So I think that's interesting. Hallsville, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Is there only one gas station up there? I mean, I don't actually know. I mean, if there's only one, maybe they have a monopoly on the market there.
Or it's the old-time sign. They have to put the ladder up against the sign, send the high school kid up to change the numbers.
No, there's at least 2.
Really? All right. Well, this has me feeling a bit nervous when I saw your post, Hannah, because, the gas prices start going down. We got inflation news yesterday, and they said, it's better than expected. And anytime we kind of see this, we start seeing Biden do a little victory lap and say, see, Bidenomics is working.
Oh, we had a couple comments even on the Facebook post.
And that people were saying it was all because of Biden?
Yeah. Well, we're always so quick to blame whoever is in office when gas prices get really high.
Of course, because that reinforces my thoughts, my own worldview.
Right. It fits the narrative, right? But, we don't praise the president necessarily when gas prices go down. So, I mean, that is an interesting point. I knew someone was going to point it out on the Wake Up Facebook page, but the Boone County Republicans are going to bat for us. So shout out to those guys.
Well, I noticed that there was some polling. I guess Biden's folks commissioned some progressive groups to do some polling, and they are now talking about walking away from the term Bidenomics because it is so roundly negative that they don't want to use the term anymore. I'm curious to see if we'll even hear it again from Karine Jean-Pierre or anyone else. That term will go to the ash heap of history, probably where his presidency ought to go, but.
Well, and I think what we know generally is just that, in an election year, if the economy is doing well, then it benefits the incumbent. And so I'm starting to get a bit nervous with all the stuff that's going on our side and the breakdown in Congress and us being blamed for it. And then we see these kind of positive economic indicators. Is that always the case, Mark? Should we expect with inflation being better than expected and gas prices being low, that's going to benefit Democrats into 2024?
I mean, if it continues as a trend, it'll be beneficial to them. I mean, obviously, if the economy does well, people feel a little more secure and are a little more happy with the incumbency. The thing about it is inflation is prices going up. It's just not going up as fast. They're not coming down. I mean, if you go to the grocery store and you fill up your grocery cart, you're not going to go back to what the cost of a grocery cart full of groceries was 4 years ago. Maybe it's only going to be 3% more expensive the next time you go. It's still going to be 20%, depending on what you're buying, 40%, 50% more expensive than it was 5 years ago. I mean, that's the real problem, and wages have not kept up with it, and people are nervous.
Yeah, I mean, that was a good point that Steve Spellman brought up yesterday. He said, hey, it was 9 for a while, it's 3 now, so people think, I'm saving. But no, what you really got is 12. It's an adder.
Exactly.
And I think anyone who's been to the grocery store lately realizes that. But, I mean, I guess, say we're massively successful in 2024. Red wave, we take over, we get the presidency. How long is it going to take us to flip the switch back?
Well, the prices are never going down. Sorry. I mean, that's the way it works. They've never gone down in history. I mean, you may get a little dip here or a little dip there on certain items. Prices are never going down. If you remember, we didn't have a lot of inflation for a period of time because there was that shrinkflation that you used to hear about.
Oh, we talked about that. It's hit Oreos.
packages got smaller, but the
Exactly.
prices stayed the same, so there was no inflation on the grocery cart. Gas going up and down. Well, first of all, gas is a terrible thing to use as a basis for the economy because it is incredibly volatile. Not just that it burns and blows up sometimes, but it goes up and down at all sorts of different whims. If you base how good the economy is based upon what the price of gas is, it's like Missouri weather. Wait a little bit, and it's going to change because
Wait
it's
for
not going to
OPEC.
stay. Yeah, and gas is always going to get more expensive, and the Biden economic policies and environmental policies are for sure going to make gas more expensive in the long run. And they're going to try to ban gas-powered vehicles sometime soon. I think it's in 2035. They've already talked about it, if not sooner. And, that's going to have its own effect on the economy.
So besides the inflation numbers, I always like to look at the Wall Street Journal and see what, America's business folks are reading. The other popular thing that they're talking about?
Tequila.
And the headline is...
Where's Pee Wee Herman when you need him?
and it's saying, tequila could go global. Isn't tequila already global? I don't get it.
Tequila is interesting because aside from, it came from Mexico, it's an American drink almost exclusively.
Really?
And
Well, they drink the mezcal down south of the border.
well, that's what. Yes, I mean, it's a North American drink. It's really not. It's not something that's popular in Europe or in other countries. But Diageo, which is the largest spirits distributor in the world, they've got a new CEO, and she is saying, "I'm taking tequila global, and it's going to be the flagship brand." And the thing that supposedly has made this possible is Casamigos, which is George Clooney's tequila that Diageo has an ownership interest in, and they're marketing it like crazy, and it's actually been pretty successful, and they've seen significant increases in sales of volume of tequila.
Now, and you were telling me that if we just go to like a standard bar or something and you order tequila, or like the grocery store, you're probably not actually getting tequila?
Well, I can't talk about a grocery store, so
Okay.
but if you go to a bar and you order a well drink, your odds are at many bars you are getting tequila flavored vodka, because tequila actually takes some effort to make, whereas vodka is about the simplest alcohol you can possibly come up with.
This is ridiculous.
Well, back in the day when I may or may not have worked in the hospitality scene,
John and his many, many lives.
there was maybe not so much of that, but there was, I would attest to, statute of limitations counselor, watering of the alcohol was kind of a foregone conclusion in a lot of places.
I thought watering down the alcohol bottle is what you did to your parents' alcohol.
There you go. had Meadow Lake in the locker, and I know nothing about that.
Speaking of statute of limitations,
Now,
I remember finding the bottle of vodka in my freezer, because I used to always keep a bottle of vodka in the freezer. And when my kids were in college, one day I pulled the bottle of vodka out and it was frozen. I don't think vodka freezes. So
Man.
even they learned the lesson of how to
really
water down
cheap vodka, Mark.
rookie mistake, Mark. All right. The other thing that is coming up in this Wall Street Journal is this young coach. She's a head coach at 23?
23 years old, so University of North Carolina lacrosse coach. She is the 4-time All-American lacrosse player, played lacrosse at North Carolina, won 4 national championships, was on the pre-Olympic team. I guess lacrosse is going to be an Olympic sport coming up. And she decided she wanted to coach. She graduated last May. She is the head coach for the University of North Carolina lacrosse team, which, as of the story, and I haven't followed lacrosse, sorry, folks out there, I'm sure you're terribly disappointed, but they were the number 1 ranked team in the country and seeded number 1 in the tournament, and looks like they will win another national championship. She's the youngest coach in major college history.
I think that's
23 years old.
That's
Wild, isn't it?
It's fascinating. And actually, lacrosse, like when I was growing up here in Mid-Mo, it wasn't something you heard a lot about and you couldn't really play. But I know I've got friends who have kids that are learning from a very early age, and Columbia's got this league going, and it's really popular.
Oh, I had a family member whose daughter was on the national champion lacrosse team a number of years ago at Boston College.
Yeah, I mean, it was an East Coast sport for a long time, and it was originally very popular in the Ivy League schools, and then it kind of filtered down into Carolina, the Duke, North Carolina area, and It's a sport that I've never watched a lacrosse game. Can't really say much about it. I don't really have any desire to watch a lacrosse game.
Come on,
but
Mark.
it seems to have gotten popular.
I mean, if you can watch the Excel National Championships on ESPN, certainly like lacrosse would be ahead of that. And I have to throw in a shout out because my husband at one time was coaching youth rugby here in town and hopes to bring that back. So I'm all about the kind of like fringe sports. And I think too for kids, like there are often scholarship opportunities in these kinds of sports that might not be as competitive as some of these other things. But when we're talking about coaching, I'm thinking you've got all of these kids out there who are like, I want to be an athlete. But like being a coach can be a pretty good deal. We just had this coach he's fired, right? And he's getting millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Jimbo Fisher, $75 million to sit on his butt for a few years.
I'm thinking,
buying out the contract.
He's going to get paid $20,000. Let me think, it's $20,000 a day for 10 years, 7 years, something like that. And his very first job as a assistant coach, when he first got it, was $20,000 a year salary. He's making $20,000 a day. How about that?
Like meteorologists have a bad rap, right? Because people are like, oh, you can be wrong and you still keep your job. But like you could be a bad coach and still end up on top. I mean, that seems like a pretty good gig. I wonder if little kids, instead of being like, I want to be a pro athlete, I want to be a fired coach. That's my life goal.
That's, there was a former coach for Kansas who had come from Notre Dame, and Charlie Weiss. Mm-hmm. And at one point he was getting 3 paychecks from 3 different schools from having been fired at 3 different places.
You know what I think?
Now that's figured out how to make the best of the world.
Now, a little bit self-interested here, but what I'm going to say is it just good lawyering, Mark? Is you got to negotiate a good contract?
Good sports agents.
And Mizzou fans say, Woody Woodenhofer, where are you when we need you?
Well, Chase Daniel was made, I don't remember, was it 40 or $60 million over a career in the NFL and started almost no games just as a backup. If you really have aspirations of playing football, coaching is a great option. Being the backup quarterback,
it's even better.
That's right.
And you get Super Bowl rings when you're.
And I'd point out one thing. You're right. He carried a clipboard, but he also was involved in the preparation, and he was available to play. I would point out about Jimbo Fisher too. Something in fairness to him, he actually has been here to Columbia several times. Most people don't know that. To Jefferson City as well, recruiting, and he did win a national championship at Florida State. I just think looking back on it, it's always easy to look back on it, but he clearly should have stayed at Florida State because he never had the success at Texas A&M. He promised all this stuff, and they never were at the level of Alabama or LSU or even Ole Miss, and it's just mediocrity doesn't work there. And that's a lot of money, Mark, no question, but understand, this better than anybody. There's a lot of deep pockets in College Station, Brian. They have the money to pay that, but boy, that's a lot of money to pay to guy just basically just sit on his couch.
They gave him everything he asked for, all the facilities, right. Everything. And in fact, when he was hired, they gave him a plaque, and it actually says National Champion Jimbo Fisher. It has 20 blank.
Yep.
So they could fill in the date when he won the national championship.
And never came close.
Guess that's going in the trash can, too.
You got John.
Sorry.
Or close.
Sorry.
Tennessee Titans quarterback Will Levis went viral for putting mayonnaise in his coffee, as we all remember. Now, though, he has a lifetime supply of the condiment. Caused a stir. That was, I guess, 2022 when he went viral saying he puts mayo in his coffee. He said he was in a restaurant with his girlfriend and grabbed the mayonnaise off the counter, squirted it in his coffee cup. Now Hellman's has done a kind of a mock press conference with him seated in front of stacks of jars of mayonnaise. But he was said, "Hey, drink your coffee black," not quite, and shot the mayonnaise into it. Now, we also knew that he had weird preferences with fruit. He eats his bananas whole, peel and all. Now he was seen online on a kick of eating a grapefruit whole, peel and all. And his teammates think he's weird because he eats pizza without cheese. And that is the rest of that strange NFL story.
Yeah, pizza without cheese, that's not even pizza, is it?
No, I think it's garlic bread. Or
breadsticks with marinara sauce.
People have super weird preferences, and I think those are all peels that you're not supposed to eat. My kids came home a couple years ago and said, "Hey, do you know you can eat the kiwi peel?" And I said, "Are you sure? Because it's kind of
Also,
hard.
just because you
Fuzzy.
can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, I was like, is someone pranking us? So I had to Google, and I'm like, is it poisonous or like bad for you? Apparently, it's got a lot of fiber, and it's actually good.
A lot of fiber.
Yeah, a lot of fiber.
And it's actually good. So I said, well, let's try it. And I did not partake, but they ate it and said, it's
When I was a
not bad.
kid, my dad used to eat peanut butter, mayonnaise, and lettuce sandwiches.
Ooh, that's gross. I went to dinner with a friend in New Orleans one time, and he popped whole shrimp in his mouth, tail, shell, and all.
Oh, that's
just
pretty
chopped
sta-
down it. My
yeah.
kids still talk about it, like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he ate the shell."
I don't think that's digestible.
Apparently, it
Back
didn't
to
ever
the
cause him
fiber
any
thing, I
problems.
guess. Yeah.
He lived.
And doesn't like Patrick Mahomes like have a ketchup fetish or something like that, where he puts ketchup on
I
everything?
think so.
That's Taylor Swift.
That would also
apparently.
be my husband.
Ketchup on steak is like a cardinal sin. I see people do that. Like, oh, how can you do that?
It's just pure sugar. I mean, that's all it is, right? I did see this. Apparently, this guy is also super weird. I saw this tweet yesterday, and I must have missed this when it originally happened. But there was that Tennessee lawmaker, and he looks like he's drinking from a Hershey's bottle, and people are like on the floor.
I didn't see that
And
one.
it looks like Hershey's
It
syrup.
does, doesn't it?
And everyone's like, what? Are you drinking Hershey syrup? And he said, no, I just don't like to throw things out. The Hershey syrup was empty. I rinsed it out.
Morning.
Brian Hauswirth, and producer Hannah.
Hello.
We are also joined by State Senator Andrew Koenig. He is gearing up for a new legislative session. Pre-filing is just a couple weeks away. And, of course, also in the midst of a run for state treasurer. Welcome to the show, Senator Koenig.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, let's get into it because the Senate caucus was last week, so you guys are hard at work on your priorities. Pre-filing is just a couple weeks away, and that's with the holiday included, so I'm sure you're well into that. What are you looking at for your own personal priorities for the next legislative session?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I sponsored Missouri's first school choice program. I'm chair of education, and so I would like that program expanded. So we're going to work hard to expand that. Also, related to education, we have situations, at least in Kansas City and St. Louis and Springfield, where teachers are changing the pronouns of kids, and we're not going to allow that. So I'll file a parental bill of rights bill. And then, the most important thing we can do as Republicans is protect our Constitution, do initiative petition reform, raise that threshold through some kind of concurrent majority in order to change Missouri's Constitution. So that's also very important to me as well.
So, Senator, obviously, we saw what happened in Ohio just recently, happened before in Kansas, Michigan, with abortion measures being on the ballot. There's multiple competing ones, at least in the process, whether they'll make it to the ballot or not this time around in Missouri. Is there a possibility to actually get initiative petition reform to the voters and get them to pass it? I know Ohio tried that and it failed overwhelmingly because of this issue. Is that something that you think there's an actual path this time around?
I do think there is, but it has to be done right. For instance, I did pass the heartbeat bill here in Missouri, so that definitely it's really important to protect that. But we need to protect our Constitution against all kinds of threats. There's all who knows what, whether it's ranked choice voting, and who knows what other liberal idea where there'll be millions of dollars from outside the state of Missouri coming in trying to change our Constitution. But yes, it can be done. It has to be done right. So we're doing it differently than what's been tried in other states. Florida obviously was successful back in 2006, raising their threshold to 60%. But what I'm advocating is more of a concurrent majority. So instead of just raising the percentage, having more of a geographical increase in order to change the Constitution. So like a majority of congressional districts would have to vote for it. So like 5 out of our 8 congressional districts, I think that's a better way to go. So that way you have that geographical distribution in order to change the Constitution. I think there's stuff in there that we need. For instance, citizen voting. Right now, we could put that in there. That's something that's very popular. And if you're in California, New York, they're letting non-citizens vote in local elections. That shouldn't happen here in Missouri. And then we can put some protections against foreign countries coming in trying to change our initiative petition process. All these things are very popular. If it was put on the ballot, I think the people of Missouri would vote for it.
Senator, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I know pre-filing is going to start just in a couple of weeks on December the 1st, which we'll be paying close attention to see what kind of bills are filed. There'll be a lot of bills, I'm sure, that have mid-Missouri interest as well. I want to go back to the issue of initiative petition reform. Crystal Quaid, who is the Democratic leader in the House, says Republicans, and this is according to her tweet 4 days ago, Republicans know they're going to lose in court, so they are already gearing up. That's according to her tweet. But the Democrats would argue, and you're talking about 5 of 8 congressional districts, they would argue, Senator, that if a majority of people in the state approve it, that it should go into effect. You disagree with that?
Well, I think if it was a statute, I would have no problem with that. But the problem is with our Constitution should be a higher threshold. We don't see this at the federal level. In order to protect minority rights, you need higher. We don't live in a direct democracy where it's majority rule, where you have 2 wolves, voting to eat a sheep. Like there should be a higher threshold to protect minority rights in our Constitution. If it's just a straight statute, I have no problem.
Okay.
Majority vote. Also, you have a situation where things aren't always fair. And as far as money, like the message is not always fair. Like perfect example of this is we had Clean Missouri and Cleaner Missouri. I mean, the people of Missouri voted in Clean Missouri, and then they voted in Cleaner Missouri, the very next election. So, it all depends on how, an issue is messaged and how much money is spent on both sides. What we're seeing in a lot of times is there's just millions of dollars of money coming in from outside the state of Missouri to push some of these initiatives. It's not like it's organic Missourians coming up with these initiative petitions.
So I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, Senator, very quickly, if I may follow up. You're saying if it's a statute, it's different, and clearly it's not a statute. You're talking about a proposed constitutional amendment from your perspective. What you'd like to see is, if it were to pass, it would have to pass in 5 of the 8 congressional districts in Missouri, because from your perspective, it needs a higher threshold. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the geographical distribution of support, I think, is important when it comes to the Constitution. You don't want the cities coming in and telling farmers what to do and vice versa. We want a geographical distribution of Missourians supporting whatever it is when it comes to the Constitution. And if, when it comes to statutes, that's a different situation. If it's a simple majority for a statute, I think that's fine.
All right. Thank you, Senator.
Senator, talk to us about the upcoming session. I know in the past years you've been a real champion of Parents' Bill of Rights and trying to keep critical race theory out of the classroom, and that legislation didn't make it through. What about next year?
Yeah, so I am going to focus. I am having a focus on Parental Bill of Rights. I did pass it through the Senate this last year, and I expect to pass it through again this year. I am putting the CRT a little bit more on a back seat and focusing more on the transgender situation. Here in St. Louis and Kansas City, and probably it's coming all across the state of Missouri, is you have this transgender stuff really being pushed on kids in the schools, and this is very detrimental for kids to think that they can change their gender. Biologically, you can't change your gender, and so we need to protect these kids. We did pass a bill last year banning transgender surgeries on minors. So that protection is currently in place.
So, Senator, you've had a lot of successes over the years in the legislature. I think colleagues and folks that we interact with think very highly of you. You're now running for state treasurer. What kind of plans, if you're successful and you become treasurer, what's the plan to really revolutionize that office?
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple things. One, for sure, I'll fight against ESG, environmental social governance. The left has come in and they're taking over our institutions, whether that's schools or corporations. One way they're doing this is they're doing it through trying to get board members on these corporations. It's being pushed by Vanguard and BlackRock. And so I will make sure that none of our tax dollars are going to be used to support that kind of activity. Also, there's a big threat from the federal government when it comes to digital currency. If they were to get a digital currency here in the state of Missouri, the amount of power they would have over individuals would be unlimited almost, because that is your personal property. They could control what you buy, whether that's guns, whether that's, just take any activity you think the left doesn't like. And so I will definitely fight against that. And then finally, I passed Missouri's first school choice program. I didn't trust the Department of Education, so I put it in the state treasurer's office. They're in charge of promulgating rules. I will help raise money. It's funded through donations. So I will work with schools across this state to try to raise money for that program and get it fully funded.
I think the biggest challenge for anyone running for a statewide office, especially a state senator, is, just getting your name out there and getting folks outside of your own district near the St. Louis area, to get to know you. And I always find it more fascinating. Tell us about the day you decided, yes, I'm going to run for public office. Yes, I'm going to put my name out there and get in the game. Was it something you always wanted to do, or was there a specific trigger that you said, I've got to take action now?
Yeah, sure. I was a small business owner. I had a paint contracting company, and I've always wanted to run for office. And at 23, the House seat came opened, it was an open seat. So I talked to my wife. I said I wanted to run for office. Really what it came down to is listening to the radio when I was painting. Started painting when I was 15. And, I said, instead of trying to complain about things, I'll run for office. So my wife and I knocked on 8,000 doors. In my first race, I was outspent 4-1. And we had a double-digit win.
And is that the same strategy you plan to take into the treasurer's race? I mean, clearly you can't knock all the doors statewide. So what do you think will set you ahead in that race?
Yeah, I mean, door knocking is definitely critical to every race I've ever run. When I decided to run for the Senate, I was running against someone who spent $1 million in his prior election. He was polling at nearly 45%. I was at 9%. We knocked on doors and chipped away at it, and was able to win that race as well. Then when I ran against Deb Lavender, that was a primary. Then when I ran for re-election in the Senate, because I sponsored the heartbeat bill and ended abortion in Missouri, the Democrats targeted me, spent $2.8 million against me. We knocked on 75,000 doors, and we were able to win by 9% in a district that Biden won. And last year I got a 100% rating from CPAC, so I'm probably the most conservative member of the Senate. But I also work with people and get things done and accomplish things. So we're going to have a similar strategy in this race. I've been traveling the state, but we'll also have a very strong ground game. I have teams in mid-Missouri, setting up a team in Springfield. Obviously, I have a large team in St. Louis when it comes to door knocking. The plan is to knock on 150,000 doors statewide, and so we're going to have a very strong presence.
I know we've got a lot of folks out there who are painting and doing other projects, listening into the radio, and I think they can agree with your stance that hard work oftentimes pays off. So it's been great to talk with you this morning, and of course, we're looking forward to following your initiatives as they work through the legislature.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You can follow me on Twitter at Koenig at Mo, and I'm also on Facebook as well.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Next up, we are going to have the Morning Bell. I'm hoping we have some good news, Mark.
Well, I hope you like sun, beaches, and high finance. Futures are up a little bit, not as much as they were earlier this morning after a BOFO day yesterday.
Wow.
Inflation number was down and the market really surged. It looked like it was going to be another really good day, and then retail sales reports came out. And retail sales are down right as we go into the Christmas season, which is probably going to have some retailers really worried. My guess is that means there'll be more sales than normal. However, Target surged their earnings way over what was estimated. Even in the fact that other retail sales were down, their stock is going crazy right now. I thought it was interesting. Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, they are divesting. They got rid of General Motors, J&J, and P&G. They're down to basically 5 companies now. That's the most expensive stock you can buy in the world. They own Apple, Bank of America, American Express, Coca-Cola, and Chevron. That's the focus of their holdings now, which I think shows where Warren Buffett's folks think the future is.
It's interesting.
Interesting market basket.
Maybe he'll downsize his 50-year-old home in Omaha.
Yeah. Well, he's getting up there in age. Someday everybody expects at some point he's going to have to retire, but never seems to happen, does it? So, you see high finance from Omaha. We're used to high finance in New York City. I mean, that's Wall Street. That's what we've all talked to. Ken Griffin, who's the owner of Citadel, which is one of the largest funds in the country, in the world, moved from Chicago to Miami, is building a huge billion-dollar tower down there, and he believes that he is going to make Miami the new Wall Street. They're on Brickell Bay in Miami, and they are more and more companies are moving out of Wall Street down to South Florida because, obviously the weather, but no income tax, state income tax.
Look what an international financial capital it was back in the days of the cocaine wars when they laundered all that money through Miami.
Well, and Miami was a financial capital early on when there was, all the fruit companies coming out of Central America.
The Banana Republic era.
Every day, people are moving to Florida, and big businesses are moving there. And Ken Griffin says maybe in 50 years, instead of calling it Wall Street, you'll call it Brickell Bay North, because the focus will be in Brickell Bay and Miami instead. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it's kind of an intriguing concept.
I think we need some messaging around that. I think there's probably a better term. But yeah, Jeff Bezos just bought a place in Miami. And again, I go back to Ron DeSantis is missing the boat. And I know you're a big Ron DeSantis guy, Mark. But, he needs to be talking about these things. Why is he not talking about exactly what we're talking about now? Hey, all of these businesses are moving. All of these rich people are deciding. The smartest finance guys in the world have decided my state is the place to be. That's a winning message.
And not only that, Donald Trump even moved to Florida. It's so popular. It's so popular. He wanted to come to my state. Why is it? I agree. I think
I've heard DeSantis say this.
I think that's the message that he should be running on. But I think, that's a positive thing that we ought to be looking at here in Missouri. Tennessee is a super fast growing state too. They don't have beaches. They don't have any of those kind of amenities, but they don't have an income tax.
Yep.
Businesses are locating there and people are locating there. We ought to get that message and think about how do we get that done here?
From Wall Street to Biscayne Bay Boulevard.
There you go.
And Mark, you perfectly set this up because tomorrow we are going to have a guest, John Stevens. He's out of Port KC. He's involved with the Hawthorne Foundation. They are one of the groups, along with the Missouri Partnership, that really is working on locating businesses and making really putting Missouri on the map, not only nationally but internationally, trying to get those big projects, those big economic development projects located right here in Missouri. So we'll have him on just after 8 o'clock tomorrow. Of course, we'll have Randy Tobler from the afternoons will be in hosting, and I will be sitting in as co-host. So excited for that. But you're right. We've got to get the message out there about Missouri. All right. Up next, Hannah, we're going to have a footwear war.
No.
I think just local news is the most important stuff to me, even though it's kind of bad stuff going on around me, but it's the most relevant to me.
finalists for the position. They are former Forest Park Chief of Police and Public Safety Director Nathaniel Clark, that's in Georgia. Major for the Human Resources Division out of Kansas City, Dan Haley. Columbia Assistant Police Chief Jill Schluty and Deputy Police Chief Michael Zeller, who's from Greeley, Colorado. And later today, Brian will be on scene and passing that info along to see who will be the next chief of the city of Columbia.
And we'll be working hard to get that person on Wake Up Mid-Missouri so we can chat with them. Tomorrow, we've got a pretty full show. I mentioned we're going to have a guest from Port KC talking about the Hawthorne Foundation and attracting businesses to Missouri. We'll also be joined by the Missouri Attorney General tomorrow. He just recently released the report on Kim Gardner, and I know it's got a lot of litigation against the Biden administration pending, so excited to chat with him. Some other things, ways you can get involved, and some local things going on. Currently, the Boone County Clerk, you can go vote, but not the kind of voting that we typically talk about.
Well, it is Boone County. You might be able to vote already.
No. Come on.
Very good, Counselor.
Brianna is actually a friend of ours, and she is really wonderful to work with, and I can always call her with questions, and she does a great job. But I actually really like this program. I believe they opened it up to high school students. They do the artwork for the I Voted stickers. Then they put out the 5 finalists, which if you get on the Boone County Clerk's socials, you can get on and actually vote. And they're very patriotic, but local artists created these stickers. And I remember the last one, I thought that's kind of a fun way to promote voting, to get high school students interested. And I like it. And no, there's no donkey on the stickers. There's no Republican or Democrat leaning stickers. One looks like
no rainbows.
No rainbows. I think is this George Washington? I think that's like a cartoon.
That one looks like a dinosaur.
There is one that looks like
holding up a purple thumb.
It's a dinosaur with a top hat on it. I'm not sure exactly how that relates to voting, but either way, you should
guessing
get on.
that the election didn't go well for that dinosaur 400 million years ago.
All right. Either way, you should really get involved and get voting in that. I think it's a fun thing, and I wish more counties did it. Also, I also have a small obsession with stickers. I just love them. Stickers are kind of having their thing.
You got kids. That kind of goes along with it, doesn't it?
Adults, not adult. That came out wrong. Not adult stickers.
Okay, Stephanie.
We cannot post those. We cannot post those to the Facebook page.
But I love when I travel now. I'm not like a big tchotchke person. Like I don't want a bunch of trinkets and stuff. But when I travel, a lot of folks have those like really nice stickers, and I put them on water bottles and suitcases and laptops and stuff.
Like the ones that people used to put on the back window of the family station wagon, on Yellowstone Park.
On the Subaru that you see driving around town with the coexist sticker. And
okay.
Or the little 23.6 sticker you saw see on the cars. So.
All right. Well, we have been talking so much about November of 2024, but we have something that we have has been overshadowed, and it's starting to shape up. I know last night at Southern Boone, they kind of had a community forum. They said, hey, we might be, doing a new project and going out for a vote in April. And so I do want to bring that up. We should have quite a few issues and other things on that April ballot. And because of when the local governments and the school districts have to put that on the ballot, we are really just kind of entering that period, and that ballot is going to be shaping up here quickly. Brian, have you heard anything else about anything else showing up in April?
Not at this time. It's just too early right now. You're absolutely right, Stephanie, and it is worth mentioning. I've reported it, and I know John has as well. Haven't done a whole lot on it because it's just a discussion right now last night. But there was a community forum at Southern Boone in Ashland about a potential, I stress potential, bond issue that would focus on improvements to the school. They're looking potentially at a new VO Ag wing. They're looking at additional classrooms, parking lot improvements. Apparently the roof has had issues as well. So that was discussed last night. That was we'll see. They're going to have to make a decision fairly quickly. I know from Chuck Basie last year with his issues filing and then having to go to court, I believe they have until January to put that on the ballot, but it's not much after that. I don't have the exact date from memory. I believe it was late January because I covered those court appearances when the court, Judge Brooke Jacobs, actually forced CPS to put Chuck Basie on the ballot. Judge Jacobs ruled that CPS violated the law. that was what he ruled. Basie ended up losing the election, came in fourth, but that was something I remember. Nothing yet. Potentially, you could see some stuff at CPS. Inevitably, we always seem to see like local schools in Centralia and Hallsville, but all of them, I'm sure, are gathering their things. But at this time, no, we really haven't. I think it is worth mentioning. You talked about the Boone County Clerk, and I agree with you. She is very, a lot of our audience probably didn't vote for her, judging from comments, but I'll tell you, she's very accessible, and she does interviews. And anytime I've ever gone over there, and she encourages people to vote. And April's huge. There's no doubt about that. But that August primary will be big on both sides in November as well. But the biggest one's first going to be April. I expect Southern Boone's going to probably have to make a decision pretty soon, but it's probably won't hear much on it till after Thanksgiving.
Well, and as Brianna has quoted this very show, the more localer, the more importanter. And importantly, before we see this and before we're able to vote on some of these local measures, the discussions are going on at these community forums, at city council meetings about what should and how, what the number is, what the proposal is. And so you can, in fact, get involved before these things even show up on the ballot and offer some input. So now is the time to be paying attention.
It's more tax increases. That's what's always coming. You ever notice that? Nobody ever puts a tax cut on the ballot in a local government. Everybody raises taxes every year.
And Mark, the way they're promoting this in Southern Boone, it's interesting. They're calling it a no tax rate increase bond issue. But
as Mark shakes his head,
which is such a fallacy, because it means that your bonds would have paid off and your tax rate would have gone down. So by the fact that you're not getting a tax cut, you're getting a tax increase, but they call it a no tax increase.
And a tax extension.
I mean, it's semantics and it's false advertising, but it's worked for school districts and they love it and they run it into the ground.
Now, as a local elected official, I feel a little bit triggered. And Mark, you're a former local elected official, and you're blaming us for stuff. I do want to note, Caleb Rowden has his big campaign kickoff tonight in Columbia, so check that out if you are so inclined. He will be. He recently announced that he is running for Secretary of State. But I do think a lot of times local folks can get a bad rap, but I heard an interesting discussion, and I haven't even mentioned this yet to you, Mark, but I want to get your take on it, so surprise. But I was over with the Libertarians this last weekend, and they were talking about infrastructure, business development, and they said, actually, in some states, we've been looking at state laws that would hamstring local governments, take away some of their authority with some of this transportation infrastructure projects. And I know there's such a, because they get so much NIMBYism, and we see that in Columbia. We see that everyone wants something, but they don't want it in their backyard. And we see it when I show up to Ashland council meetings and they say, oh, we need more housing, we need more renters, but put it over there. And so they said in some areas they're actually going in and saying, okay, the state is going to tell local governments what they can and can't do. And and I thought that was weird for coming from libertarians, especially because they're very hands off. And also from a conservative perspective, don't we want the control at the local level and not at the state level?
Like the developer Wolverton we had on just the other day, and the things that he tried to do in Ashland and got into some of that annexation issue, and it was the yes, but.
Right.
Yeah, the problem you've got is zoning, and zoning's kind of the problem that everybody comes across. It's designed to protect your property, and the NIMBYism really is the issue. I think it's a terrible idea for the state to be telling you where you can or can't place things. I mean, if you're truly a libertarian, if you really believe in libertarian, the only state law ought to be you can't have zoning in local governments, period. In other words, pure capitalism. If you can buy the land, you can build on it whatever you want. Now, that's unlikely to ever go, because Ashland will never agree to allow the pig farm next to the school, next to the salvage plant, next to the rendering facility, next to the $1 million homes. But
But
that's the theory.
That's the essence of property rights, that if you paid for your property, and obviously, if you buy it and it's already zoned, you can do the research and figure out how the properties around you are zoned. So you go in, hopefully with an informed decision about your own property and what might the future look like around that. But I kind of lean in the realm of just straight property rights, and you should be able to do whatever you want. And but I don't like the idea of the state stepping in.
It is interesting. A great discussion there. I've not heard this, by the way, about potentially bringing in the state. That also I agree with Mark. There'd be a lot of concern, I think, from both Democrats and Republicans in the Capitol, because it would depend on who at the state is going to be who at the state is going to be monitoring that and deciding that. But for years in Columbia, and I know John has seen it in Jefferson City. When I was in Jefferson City, I saw it. You'd have these big land use issues, and they would be very controversial. And it would be they'd pack I haven't seen them in a while, but they'd pack the council chambers. About half of the room would be on one side, half the other. And if you're a council member or a county commissioner, you had to vote one way, you were going to anger about half of the audience. And there are a number of councilmen over the years who either retired or in some cases weren't reelected over things like that. You don't see it as much, and I think it's because there's just not a whole lot of room to grow. But I'll give you guys one quick example. People don't even think about it now. You'd have to be in town a long time. But if you go out on Forum Boulevard in Columbia, they have what's known as the Colonies. I think people know where that is. It's out near Chapel Hill. It's a beautiful area. It's called the Colonies, lots of shops. Nobody thinks anything of it now. They've got the road. But Chester Edwards was a council member. Our old-time listeners will remember this. This was back in 1989 and 1990, and he supported the Colonies. And he was recalled from that post, not for any other, but for one vote about the Colonies. As I recall, it was Carl Cruz and some others in the community. And he was handily defeated. It was, I can't remember the vote, but he was trounced in the recall election. You don't even hear about people complaining about the Colonies now. So I think it comes and goes. That was a big deal at the time. I'm not even sure Chester Edwards is still alive. He'd have to be getting up there. But that was a big deal. But I have not seen Walgreens here in Columbia. I covered that in 2000 at Nifong and Forum, and people were almost literally in each other's faces over that, how upset they were. And it's because they were going to build the Walgreens near houses, and people thought it was going to ruin their homes. And others were. I mean, it was a big deal at the time. Now I don't hear anybody talking about it. So it's just, I guess it comes and goes. Those are two examples of things that were very, very high profile at the time. Now, not much.
Nothing gets people fired up like land use issues, but I think as we move forward, especially at the local level and the state level, and talk about, what does it mean to be a Republican, I think some of these issues, I think we are getting down a dangerous path because, for example, the state legislature has said it's fine to step in and step on school districts and tell them, hey, you can't do this. We're going to pass a state law to tell a school district you no longer have this authority. And I get nervous that at some point they're going to step in and tell local governments, okay, we're taking that from you.
Well, I mean, they've already stepped in a lot of issues with local governments, particularly St. Louis and Kansas City, because the politics obviously don't like what the Democrats are doing in a big city. Pass a law that says you can't do it, like plastic bags. Remember, that was some legislation.
There you go.
There were several states or cities that were trying to ban plastic bags. The legislature passed a bill saying you can't ban plastic bags. I mean, you talk about stepping on local control. That's pretty down into the local control weeds.
That was Dan Scholl from Imperial that passed that bill.
These are opening up that fridge, you got to clean it out before next week because we're going to have a lot of leftovers.
And
here.
I played it in the right spot this time.
Hey, gold star. All right, John, what's in your fridge?
My question was our discussion we just had about Big Brother wanting to be the one to determine what you can and can't do with your property. Mark can relate a number of years ago, Cole County and zoning and that whole debate and ballot issue.
Yep, there was a citizens commission. There's a citizens commission that wanted to do zoning. Came forward with a planning and zoning proposal. We put it on the ballot. I actually voted no on it. I wasn't in support of it, but we promised that if the commission got put together, that there would be an opportunity to vote on it.
And it went down in flames.
And it went down in flames. And you don't want zoning in your county. Trust me, not a good thing.
At the libertarian thing, someone said government should not decide what's a legitimate or illegitimate use of your body. I would say the same thing about your property, really.
Until you have one next door to you, right? Hey,
all right, what do you have for leftovers, Mark?
Thanksgiving's next week. Biggest travel season in history.
Oh, it's crazy.
TSA,
I was at the airport.
TSA is saying that next Sunday, not 4 days from now, but the Sunday after Thanksgiving will be the single biggest travel day in the history of the United States for going through TSA gates. We're talking about 2.7 million people going through the TSA gates that day alone.
Oh my gosh. I saw
That's a lot of stinky feet.
I saw a video yesterday of folks down in Orlando, and they were in such a long line. They said 2 hours was not enough. We literally stood and watched our plane take off waiting in line.
It makes you really appreciate flying out of Columbia's airport where you don't have to wait in line because you can get right through security. They do a great job up there.
It is quite lovely, but I am recalling an event last Sunday of Thanksgiving where I believe our Wake Up family friend Brandon and Mark and I were all parked on separate parts of I-70 trying to get back to mid-Missouri. And unfortunately, I'm planning on traveling on that day again this year. And so although I'm sure TSA is going to be overwhelmed, I have fears about what that day looks like on I-70.
I had to drop down to Herman to get to Jeff City. Saved me 45 minutes by dropping down to Herman and
grabbing 94. Huh?
You're welcome, because I think I was ahead of you and I gave you the heads up and I was parked in it.
And it was all the way from St. Louis. There was 1 or 2 spaces where you could even drive more than 30 miles an hour, and after that it was just parking lot. All of I-70.
It really was. And so I'm really looking forward and thankful for the work that we can expect on I-70. We talked a little bit about fringe sports earlier today, be it lacrosse, rugby, all of those things. Is volleyball a fringe sport? I would say.
I wouldn't consider it a fringe sport.
Well, and Hannah, I think you
second tier. How's that?
Okay. Hannah, I think you sent me this. There's a new pro volleyball federation coming to Kansas City. I think that's
in the year 2025? That's kind of cool for, the state of Missouri, always looking to bring in new businesses. And if it's a big league, like it sounds like it might be, that could potentially be something big for KC.
I've been shocked at the photos and videos coming out of St. Louis with this new soccer stadium. I think that's doing some really big things. And there are some dedicated volleyball fans. So good for Kansas City. Of course, they've got big soccer stuff coming their way as well. Okay, tomorrow